The first sign came as a soft shimmer in the night sky. People across the world noticed unusual lights hovering over oceans, cities, and deserts. At first, many thought it was a meteor shower, or perhaps some kind of aurora. But the pattern was too precise, too controlled to be natural. Soon the truth became impossible to ignore. Massive ships, unlike anything humans had ever imagined, appeared in Earth's orbit. They glimmered like liquid silver, reflecting sunlight in shifting patterns that made them seem alive. Governments scrambled to respond. Military satellites tracked the ships, recording their size, shape, and movements. Scientists puzzled over their unusual energy readings. The ships did not carry weapons, or at least none that anyone could detect. Instead, they radiated an almost peaceful energy, as if their very presence was meant to calm rather than intimidate. Then, a message appeared, not through radio or television, but as a direct projection into global communication networks. It was a voice, gentle and clear, speaking in dozens of human languages at once. "People of Earth," it said, "we come in peace. We are the Varelians. We seek friendship, knowledge, and cooperation. War brings destruction. Together we can explore the stars safely and wisely." The world was stunned. Across continents, people stopped in their tracks, listening. News channels interrupted regular programming, broadcasting live footage of the hovering ships. Ordinary humans, farmers, office workers, students, and children watched in awe. For the first time in history, Earth was not alone. In the capitals of the world, leaders convened emergency meetings. The United Nations called for a summit of all major nations. Diplomats, scientists, military advisors, and intelligence officers filled conference rooms in New York, Geneva, and Beijing. The question was simple but terrifying. Do we trust them or do we prepare for war? Some nations saw opportunity. Their leaders believed the Varelians could provide technologies that would end hunger, cure diseases, and solve energy crises. "This is a chance to leap forward centuries in a single step," said one diplomat. Others were more cautious. They feared deception, invasion, or mind control. The mere scale of the ship suggested a power humanity could not match. If the Varelians were hostile, Earth would not survive. Amid this uncertainty, ordinary humans reacted in ways that governments could not control. Social media exploded with excitement. Children drew pictures of the Varelians and shared them online. Scientists speculated about alien biology and technology. Philosophers wrote essays about humanity's place in the universe. Some people prayed for guidance, while others simply stared at the sky, hoping for a glimpse of the mysterious visitors. The Varelians did not rush their message. They sent smaller crafts toward Earth, carefully avoiding cities but clearly demonstrating their ability to hover with precision. They projected holographic images of their planet, vast cities that shimmered like crystals, oceans glowing with bioluminescent life, and skies filled with flying creatures unlike anything on Earth. These images were breathtaking. But more than that, they showed how Varelians lived in harmony with their environment, balancing technology and nature in ways humans had only dreamed of. Even more striking was their demonstration of harmless power. They could manipulate energy to create floating bridges, levitating plants, and glowing tools that seemed to work on thought alone. It was technology beyond comprehension, yet they used it carefully and respectfully, never threatening anyone. The message was clear. They could destroy humanity if they wanted, but they chose not to. Yet not everyone saw it this way. Earth's militaries, always trained to expect the worst, saw opportunity and caution. Secretly, they began mobilizing fleets and special forces, preparing for a possible strike. Armies drilled and jets scrambled over borders. Scientists were pressured to create defensive systems that could counter the unknown. The world held its breath, caught between hope and fear. Meanwhile, a small group of civilians formed grassroots peace initiatives. They organized rallies, online campaigns, and community discussions. They carried messages of understanding. We can meet them with kindness, not fear. And this is our chance to learn and grow. Their voices were a counterpoint to the growing chorus of militarism. In New York, Dr. Lila Sanders, a linguist specializing in alien languages, was called to the United Nations. She had spent years theorizing about the possibility of extraterrestrial contact, and now she faced it in real life. When shown the holographic message from the Varelians, she felt a mix of awe and urgency. "They are trying to communicate," she said. "We must respond with care, not weapons. Every action we take will define humanity's future." The first direct encounter came when a Varelian craft descended over the Pacific Ocean, large enough to be seen from hundreds of kilometers away. It hovered above the water without creating waves, radiating a soft blue light. Cameras captured every moment. Then slowly, a smaller craft emerged, gliding toward the surface. Its doors opened, revealing beings humanoid in shape, glowing faintly with internal light and exuding a calm that seemed almost tangible. They carried no weapons, no threatening devices, only tools that shimmered softly. One of the beings, taller than any human, stepped forward and projected a message. Its voice was melodic yet precise. "People of Earth, we wish to meet your leaders in peace. We mean no harm. We ask only for dialogue, for understanding, and for the chance to learn together." Humanity held its collective breath. Some saw it as a miracle. Others saw it as a trap. Military satellites recorded every movement, analyzing the craft, the beings, and the energy they emitted. Every human on Earth seemed to be watching, waiting for the first sign of aggression, but none came. Still, fear and ambition were stronger than hope in some hearts. Nations began preparing contingency plans. Battle fleets were moved into strategic positions. Soldiers trained in zero-gravity combat and advanced robotics prepared for a confrontation that may never come. Military leaders argued fiercely with diplomats, saying that negotiation without readiness was suicide. And yet, as the days passed, something remarkable began to happen. Ordinary humans, free from the fear that guided governments, began building bridges of understanding. Scientists sent messages back to the Varelians, asking questions about energy systems, medicine, and space travel. Children wrote letters, fascinated by the strange, beautiful beings. Artists painted murals imagining a future where humans and Varelians worked together. Even among soldiers, hesitation grew. Some began to question orders, wondering whether the aliens were truly hostile, or whether humanity's fear was the real threat. Quietly, these soldiers began keeping records, documenting the Varelians' peaceful actions. They noticed patterns. The aliens never struck first, never retaliated unnecessarily, and always sought dialogue. Dr. Sanders became the human liaison. She worked tirelessly, translating Varelian signals, arranging safe meeting protocols, and explaining humanity's complexity to the visitors. She understood both sides. The aliens with their patience and intelligence, and humans with their fear, ambition, and potential for growth. By the end of the first week, humanity faced a choice. Would they respond to peace with fear, preparing weapons and fleets for an unnecessary war? Or would they meet curiosity and goodwill with courage and understanding? The world had never been at such a crossroads. Every human felt it, whether they realized it or not. The Varelians waited. They hovered silently above the oceans and mountains, watching humanity's response. Their message was clear, even if not everyone understood it. We come in peace. The choice is yours. And somewhere in the heart of Earth, the first soldiers were already boarding ships, preparing for a confrontation that might never need to happen. Fear and hope clashed across continents in the minds of leaders, soldiers, and civilians alike. Humanity stood at the edge of history, and the path they chose would define not just themselves but their place in the galaxy. The night sky, once a symbol of mystery and wonder, now carried a heavier weight. Glimmering ships floated above Earth like silent sentinels, waiting for humanity to prove that it could rise above fear. For the first time in centuries, humans realized that their greatest enemy might not be aliens but themselves. The following days were unlike anything humanity had ever experienced. The Varelians had established a massive floating embassy just above the Pacific Ocean, hovering silently like a jewel in the sky. Its surface shimmered with soft colors that shifted with the sunlight, reflecting an otherworldly beauty. The humans who approached it for the first time could hardly believe that such beings were real, that they were here, in peace. Dr. Lila Sanders and a select team of scientists, linguists, and diplomats were chosen to be the first humans to meet the aliens in person. Protective measures were minimal because the Varelians carried nothing that could harm them. The first moments in the embassy were surreal. The interior was filled with light that seemed alive, pulsing gently as though the walls themselves breathed. Strange plants floated in midair, their roots moving slowly through glowing water. Tools and devices hovered as if held by invisible hands, but nothing was aggressive or threatening. The Varelians emerged. Their forms were humanoid but taller and luminous, with eyes that reflected intelligence and kindness. They moved with grace, each gesture deliberate and calm. Their leader, who introduced itself as Kalen, spoke directly to the humans. "We know your species is young in the galaxy," Kalen said in perfect English, "yet you carry great potential. We come to guide, to learn, and to share. We do not seek conquest or dominance. Only understanding." Dr. Sanders felt a shiver of awe. Here were beings who could have destroyed humanity in an instant, yet they came with open hands and patient hearts. She knew that this moment would be remembered forever, no matter what happened next. Back on Earth, the media broadcast live images of the meeting. People everywhere watched humans and Varelians standing together, exchanging gestures and symbols that spoke of friendship. Yet even as hope grew among ordinary citizens, fear hardened in the minds of military leaders. Generals argued that the aliens' restraint was a trick, that peace was a mask for power. Fleet commanders pressed for readiness, demanding that soldiers and warships continue preparing for a strike if necessary. On the embassy, dialogue began. The Varelians explained their history, their culture, and their philosophy. They had survived wars in their past, but they had learned to prioritize knowledge, communication, and empathy. "Violence always ends in loss," Kalen said, eyes glowing softly. "Progress comes from trust and cooperation, not fear and aggression." The humans listened, fascinated. Scientists asked questions about energy sources, medicine, and environmental management. The aliens showed devices that could purify water instantly, heal injuries rapidly, and generate energy without consuming fuel. They explained principles of mathematics, physics, and ethics that challenged human thinking. The Varelians never pressured, never commanded. They only shared, inviting humans to learn. Meanwhile, ordinary people across the globe were beginning to change. Children painted murals of humans and Varelians together, imagining a future of exploration and wonder. Teachers held special classes, explaining what peaceful cooperation with intelligent beings might look like. Artists composed songs inspired by the shimmering forms of the visitors, blending human and Varelian concepts. People discussed not just what the aliens could do for humanity, but what humanity could learn from them about kindness, wisdom, and self-control. Even soldiers began to feel conflict. Many of them had been trained to expect an attack, to see every unknown as a threat. Yet when they observed the Varelians, they could not ignore the truth. These beings had done nothing to provoke aggression, yet they continued to approach with patience and courtesy. A few soldiers quietly refused orders, leaving their posts to observe or participate in peaceful exchanges. Reports of such refusals spread quickly, creating tension in military command structures worldwide. As the days passed, the aliens extended their diplomacy. They requested meetings with national leaders, but also with communities, scientists, and youth groups. They emphasized that trust was built gradually, that understanding took time. "We do not judge humanity by its fears," Kalen said to one gathering of students, "but by its courage to learn and its willingness to choose wisely." Political tension, however, did not fade. Some nations were deeply divided, their leaders torn between hope and fear. Secret military operations continued. Satellites monitored every Varelian movement, and fleets were positioned in strategic orbits. High-ranking generals insisted that if the aliens were truly peaceful, they would understand why preparation was necessary. "If we do not act first," one general warned, "we risk losing control of our future." Yet with every interaction, the Varelians demonstrated that aggression was not their way. During one demonstration, a human vessel accidentally drifted too close to a Varelian ship. Instead of retaliating, the aliens guided it gently away using a field of energy that moved the craft without force. Cameras captured the event, and civilians around the world cheered the display of restraint. Humanity began to realize that strength could be measured not only by weapons, but by wisdom, patience, and moral courage. Dr. Sanders became the human liaison, translating not only language but intent. She explained to world leaders the meaning behind the aliens' gestures, showing that their culture valued peace above all. Kalen, in turn, listened to human concerns, learning about fear, politics, and survival instincts. The embassy became a place of exchange where both species grew in understanding. Among ordinary humans, a grassroots movement flourished. Volunteers built communication centers to help send messages to the Varelians. Scientists developed small projects to test new technologies shared by the visitors. Students studied the principles of cooperation that the aliens taught. People who had once feared the unknown now saw it as an opportunity to grow. However, the shadow of military preparation loomed. Some nations were unwilling to fully trust the Varelians, citing hypothetical scenarios in which peaceful gestures were masks for hidden agendas. Armies trained harder, warships moved into position, and secret discussions about preemptive strikes continued. The conflict between hope and fear, diplomacy and military readiness stretched across continents, creating a tense and uncertain atmosphere. The Varelians, aware of this tension, did not retreat. Instead, they continued their patient diplomacy. They organized forums where humans could discuss fears and aspirations openly, inviting students, scientists, and ordinary citizens to voice their thoughts. They shared lessons from their own history, including times when fear had led to needless conflict, and how cooperation had transformed their civilization. During one forum, Kalen said, "Your species is young, but it carries extraordinary potential. Fear is natural, yet courage comes from choosing understanding over hostility. You are capable of wisdom beyond what your weapons suggest. This is the test you face." It was a simple statement, yet it carried immense weight. Humans began to feel the responsibility of their choices. It became clear that the future would not be dictated by alien power, but by humanity's ability to rise above fear. Civilians, artists, scientists, and even hesitant soldiers began to question the orders of militaristic leaders. Could they choose restraint when it was easier to strike? Could they embrace curiosity instead of suspicion? As days turned into weeks, small victories of understanding appeared. A school in Europe broadcast a student concert to the embassy, using Varelian instruments that glowed with energy. A team of human engineers worked alongside alien technicians to purify a contaminated lake, demonstrating cooperation in practical ways. News of these achievements spread quickly, inspiring hope that peace was possible. Yet the threat of human aggression never vanished. A faction of Earth's military continued to prepare for conflict, interpreting patience as weakness. They secretly studied Varelian defense capabilities, plotting strategies that could overpower the aliens if necessary. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, a reminder that the battle for Earth's future was not only against an external threat, but also within the hearts and minds of humans themselves. Dr. Sanders understood this dual challenge better than anyone. She knew the Varelians offered wisdom and guidance, but humanity had to choose for itself. No alien technology could force morality. Every human action, every decision to cooperate or to strike, would shape not only this encounter but the destiny of their species in the galaxy. By the end of the second week, the world reached a tentative balance. The Varelians continued to teach, demonstrate, and communicate. Civilians embraced dialogue, hope, and curiosity. Militaristic factions remained wary, preparing for a confrontation that might never come. And humanity, for the first time, realized that peace required courage just as much as war required strength. In orbit above Earth, the alien embassy glimmered softly, a beacon of patience and reason. On the planet below, people looked up at it, some with hope, some with fear, and some with the dawning realization that the future depended not on who had the bigger weapons, but who could choose the wiser path, and somewhere, in the heart of every human who dared to see the truth, the first seeds of a new era began to grow, a time when curiosity, courage, and cooperation might one day define humanity's place among the stars. Despite all signs of goodwill, fear continued to grip the hearts of some humans. Military leaders, convinced that the Varelians' patience masked a hidden threat, had made a decision in secret. They would strike first. High above Earth, in the vastness of orbit, battle fleets moved into position, weapons armed and ready. Soldiers trained for zero-gravity combat. Robotic drones hovered silently and warships glimmered under the sun. Meanwhile, the Varelians continued their efforts at diplomacy. Kalen and other leaders of their kind had not altered a single word of their message. They continued to teach, to guide, and to demonstrate that violence was not necessary. In their embassy hovering above the Pacific, they prepared for human visits, continuing to share technology and knowledge, unaware of the storm forming in human minds. Dr. Lila Sanders sensed the tension. Reports of military movements reached her through official channels, though governments did not reveal their full plans. She tried to warn world leaders, pleading for patience. "They have done nothing to harm us," she said repeatedly. "If we attack, we betray our own principles and risk destroying the trust that could change humanity forever." But her words fell on ears hardened by fear. High-ranking generals argued that waiting was dangerous, that hesitation could be fatal. "If they are peaceful, they will forgive us later," one officer said grimly. "But if they are hostile, every second we wait costs lives. We cannot take that risk." Then the order came. Across the globe, military fleets fired warning shots near Varelian vessels. Satellites monitored the response, waiting for retaliation. But the Varelians did not strike back. Instead, they moved calmly, using fields of energy to redirect human ships without harming them. Weapons were disabled mid-flight, drones floated harmlessly in orbit, and missiles were gently diverted into empty space. Every act of restraint highlighted the contrast between human aggression and alien patience. On Earth, civilians watched in disbelief. News channels broadcast images of missiles halted in midair, ships moving apart without collision, and soldiers pausing, bewildered by the aliens' unwillingness to fight. Protests erupted in many cities. People demanded that governments stop attacking. Teachers paused lessons to discuss what they were witnessing. Parents explained to their children that true strength sometimes meant restraint, not destruction. Even among soldiers, hesitation spread. Many who had trained for combat found themselves unable to act against beings who had done nothing to provoke them. Some refused orders outright, leaving their posts or disabling weapons to prevent harm. Others secretly recorded events, documenting every moment of the Varelians' restraint, hoping that the world would see the truth. Dr. Sanders and her team attempted a last-minute intervention. They communicated directly with military commanders, explaining what the aliens' actions meant. "They could destroy your fleets instantly," she said, voice shaking with urgency. "But they choose not to. This is a choice and we must match it. Violence will not save us, it will only destroy trust." The generals, however, were resolute. They believed that delaying action would weaken humanity's position in the galaxy. Orders were repeated. Continue the assault if the aliens did not comply immediately. Warships fired again, this time closer to the Varelian embassy. Human missiles streaked through the sky, targeting locations where the aliens had never shown aggression. And then, for the first time, the Varelians acted, but not as humans expected. Kalen raised a luminous hand, and a soft blue energy field expanded from the embassy. The missiles slowed, hovered mid-air, and gently fell into the ocean unharmed. Robotic drones sent to attack were guided away, their mechanisms temporarily disabled, and every human soldier who attempted aggression was blocked with minimal force. Enough to prevent harm, but not enough to cause panic. The effect on humans was profound. Soldiers, generals, and civilians alike watched as the aliens displayed what could only be called mercy. They could have destroyed the fleets in an instant, yet they chose restraint. Across Earth, people began to question the orders of their leaders. Could fear justify betrayal of a species that offered only peace? In one fleet command center, Captain Marcus Vey felt the weight of history pressing down on him. He had trained for war his entire life, believing that strength meant power. But now, watching the aliens redirect missiles without violence, he realized that true strength could lie in moral courage. "They are showing us what humanity could be," he whispered to his co-pilot, a young officer who had hesitated at the first sign of orders. "And we are failing that test." At the Varelian embassy, Kalen addressed Dr. Sanders and her team. "Your species has courage," the alien said softly, "yet fear guides many of you. We do not judge those who act from instinct, but we hope that your leaders and people will learn. The choice for peace is always yours, but it requires wisdom." Despite their calm, tension remained high. Human fleets continued to orbit in readiness, though many soldiers refused to engage. Political leaders argued heatedly over broadcasts, some accusing the aliens of manipulation, others calling for immediate cessation of hostilities. In cities worldwide, people debated the meaning of what they had witnessed. "If they can stop us without harming a single human," one teacher said to her students, "then what excuse do we have for violence?" Meanwhile, civilians began taking independent action. Volunteers worked to send messages of apology and friendship to the Varelians, hoping to mend the damage caused by the first attacks. Scientists shared data, students composed art, and ordinary citizens offered gestures of goodwill. Slowly, a movement of hope began to counteract fear. Even within the military, cracks appeared. Soldiers who had once fired weapons hesitated, unsure of their mission. Some shared images and videos with the public, showing how the Varelians had acted with restraint and mercy. Public opinion began to shift. The message was clear. Aggression was no longer seen as the path to safety. Patience, understanding, and moral courage became the markers of true strength. Dr. Sanders realized that this moment was pivotal. Humanity had faced a choice, and for the first time, they could see what true leadership required. The Varelians had offered knowledge, friendship, and restraint. They had proven that violence was not necessary for survival. The question now was whether humans could rise above fear and embrace these lessons. In one quiet observation room, a group of young soldiers watched the embassy from a distance. "They are not attacking us," said one, voice trembling. "They could if they wanted." "Why don't they?" "Because strength is not in destroying," replied another, thinking of the lessons Dr. Sanders had shared. "It's in holding back when you could strike." And for the first time they understood the weight of choice. Warships and missiles could no longer define power. Courage, wisdom, and moral restraint could. Humanity was learning, slowly, painfully, but undeniably, that being strong meant more than having weapons. It meant having the ability to act rightly when it mattered most. By the end of the third week, a fragile truce had emerged. The Varelians continued their peaceful demonstrations, sharing knowledge and culture with humans willing to listen. Militaries remained in orbit, though many soldiers refused to act, leaving only a shadow of threat. Civilians celebrated every small victory of dialogue, art, and collaboration. The first true hope of lasting peace began to grow. Humanity had faced its own fear and aggression, and had glimpsed a better path. Yet the shadow of potential conflict lingered. Some humans still prepared secretly for violence, unable to abandon distrust. The story of the first betrayal would not be forgotten, and the challenge of choosing peace over fear would continue. In the skies above Earth, the Varelian embassy glimmered softly, a testament to patience, wisdom, and restraint. Below, humans looked up with awe, fear, and wonder. They had seen what true strength could be, and for some, the lesson had taken root. That courage was not in striking first, but in holding fast to principles even when it seemed impossible. And for Dr. Sanders, Kalen, and the growing number of humans willing to learn, the future remained uncertain, but the first step toward a new era of understanding had been taken. The battle was not yet over. Humanity had betrayed trust, yes, but they had also begun to awaken to the possibility of greatness. The real war was not against aliens, it was against fear, doubt, and the part of humanity that could forget the lessons of restraint and courage. Above Earth, the Varelians waited as they always had, patient and unyielding, proving that peace was not weakness, and that humanity could rise if only it chose to. The skies above Earth were quiet now, though the tension below had not disappeared. The Varelians' patience had been tested, and the humans' first act of aggression had left a deep mark. Yet instead of retaliation, the aliens remained calm, their glowing embassy hovering above the Pacific, silent and unwavering. For the first time, humanity had a clear mirror to see itself, not in victory or defeat, but in the choices it made when power was available. News of the failed attacks spread like wildfire across the globe. Ordinary people, soldiers, and leaders alike were forced to confront a simple but unsettling truth. Earth had struck first, yet the Varelians had caused no harm. Families gathered in their living rooms, staring at screens filled with images of ships moving gracefully through orbit, missiles redirected harmlessly into the ocean, and soldiers standing frozen, unable to follow through with destructive orders. Across cities, towns, and villages, the contrast between human fear and alien restraint sparked debate, reflection, and, for many, shame. In the United Nations, leaders struggled to respond. Some blamed rogue military factions for the preemptive strikes, insisting that the attacks were carried out without authorization. Others argued that hesitation had cost humanity the chance to demonstrate dominance. Heated arguments filled the chambers. But underlying the political tension was a deeper, almost unspoken question. Could humanity rise above fear and aggression, or was violence always the default choice? Dr. Lila Sanders became a central figure in this reflection. She toured cities, media outlets, and academic institutions, sharing her experiences at the Varelian embassy. She told stories of patience, restraint, and understanding, urging people to see that strength was measured not by weapons, but by courage, empathy, and moral choice. "They could have destroyed us in an instant," she said repeatedly, "yet they chose not to." The question now is whether we can act with the same wisdom. Civilians responded with remarkable energy. Grassroots peace movements flourished. Schools organized workshops where children could learn about dialogue and cooperation. Universities hosted discussions on ethics, diplomacy, and the meaning of strength. Artists painted murals depicting humans and Varelians working together, creating floating cities, healing lands, and exploring the stars side by side. Social media buzzed with campaigns calling for understanding and restraint, highlighting examples of human soldiers who had refused to attack. Even soldiers were forced to reconsider their actions. Many of those who had been part of the preemptive strike felt a profound sense of shame and confusion. They had been trained to follow orders, to strike first if threatened, but the aliens' restraint had exposed the moral complexity of such obedience. Some quietly disobeyed new orders, refusing to participate in further attacks. Others recorded their experiences, documenting the contrast between aggression and mercy. Slowly, a small but growing number of military personnel began to advocate for diplomacy over confrontation. Amid this moral reflection, the Varelians continued their demonstrations of peaceful technology. They helped restore polluted rivers, purified the air in densely populated cities, and repaired damaged infrastructure without asking for compensation. Their actions were not only practical, they were symbolic. Every healed ecosystem, every floating energy bridge, and every gesture of patience reminded humanity that violence was not necessary to achieve progress. In one city, a young teacher named Amir organized a community forum where civilians and former soldiers shared their experiences. They discussed fear, courage, and the consequences of aggression. One former pilot admitted, "I was ready to fire missiles at them. I thought I was protecting Earth, but I couldn't. Watching them avoid harming us, it made me question everything I was trained to do." Others nodded, sharing similar stories of hesitation and moral awakening. Political leaders, meanwhile, faced growing public pressure. Citizens demanded accountability, transparency, and dialogue. Some governments began to secretly communicate with the Varelians, hoping to undo the damage caused by the preemptive strikes. These initial contacts were cautious and small, but they signaled the first steps toward genuine reconciliation. Diplomatic channels slowly opened, and humanity began to realize that the future would not be determined by military might, but by moral courage, humility, and the willingness to learn. Dr. Sanders worked tirelessly to bridge the gap. She translated messages between humans and Varelians, explaining cultural nuances, fears, and hopes. Kalen, observing these efforts, praised the humans who were choosing understanding over aggression. "Your species is young," Kalen said during one meeting, "but it carries the potential to be great. Fear is natural, but courage is the choice to rise above it. You are learning that now." Across the globe, ordinary people began acting on this new understanding. Volunteers helped rebuild areas affected by the initial conflict, planting gardens, cleaning rivers, and restoring ecosystems. Scientists began collaborating with Varelians to improve energy systems, medicine, and environmental technologies. Students participated in joint experiments with alien technology, learning lessons in cooperation and creativity. Slowly, humanity was discovering that growth was possible even after the mistakes of the past. In orbit, the Varelians observed these developments with calm attention. They understood that change in humanity would be slow, uneven, and sometimes frustrating, yet they also recognized that the seeds of moral awakening were taking root. Their patience remained steadfast, a quiet reminder that true strength is measured not in retaliation, but in guidance, understanding, and mercy. Even the media began to shift focus. Instead of emphasizing fear and potential threats, stories highlighted examples of courage, compassion, and cooperation. News programs featured interviews with soldiers who had refused to attack, scientists collaborating with aliens, and ordinary citizens advocating for peace. Public perception began to change, revealing that the narrative of fear and aggression could be replaced by a story of moral courage and growth. Yet challenges remained. Some military factions continued to prepare secretly, unwilling to abandon fear as a guiding principle. They monitored the Varelian embassy and planned contingencies for potential conflict. Tension still lingered, a reminder that humanity's journey toward understanding would not be easy. But even within these factions, cracks appeared. Soldiers questioned orders, debated strategy, and in small ways began to consider diplomacy over aggression. Dr. Sanders reflected on the paradox of humanity. The species was capable of fear, violence, and mistakes, yet it was also capable of courage, moral awakening, and growth. The Varelians had provided a mirror, showing humans what they could be at their best. It was up to humanity to decide whether to embrace that lesson or ignore it. In one quiet moment, Kalen spoke to Dr. Sanders in the embassy. "We came to teach by example," the alien said softly. "Violence is easy. Mercy is hard. But it is the path that leads to growth, to discovery, and to lasting peace. Your species has begun to understand this. That is why we remain." Dr. Sanders nodded. She had seen ordinary humans rising to the challenge. Civilians advocating for peace, soldiers refusing to strike, scientists collaborating with aliens. All of it demonstrated that humanity was capable of learning from its mistakes. It was not immediate and it was not perfect, but it was real. Across Earth, people began to embrace a new way of thinking. Schools taught lessons on empathy and understanding. Artists created works celebrating cooperation, and communities organized dialogues about fear, courage, and choice. Slowly, humanity began to shift from a species guided by instinct and fear to one capable of moral reflection and conscious decision-making. By the end of the 4th week, the atmosphere had changed. Militaries remained, but their role was shifting. Governments began to emphasize diplomacy and education, rather than aggression and control. Civilians, inspired by the Varelians' example, took active roles in shaping the future. Humanity was learning that courage was not only the ability to fight, but the ability to choose restraint, understanding, and hope in the face of fear. And above Earth, the Varelian embassy continued to hover, a silent reminder that patience and wisdom could outshine aggression. The aliens had offered guidance, technology, and example, but the ultimate choice belonged to humans. Could humanity rise to the challenge and embrace the potential for greatness, or would fear and aggression continue to dominate? The answer was beginning to emerge. In small, quiet ways across cities and nations, humanity was learning that the future depended not on weapons but on courage, empathy, and the willingness to choose peace even when it was hard. For the first time in history, people felt the possibility of a new path, one where humans could join the larger galaxy not as conquerors, but as allies, learners, and creators. And while the shadow of past aggression lingered, the reflection of what humanity could become shone brightly. The Earth below was quiet, but the tension in hearts remained palpable. For weeks, humanity had witnessed the patience and restraint of the Varelians, while reflecting on its own mistakes. The failed preemptive strike had shaken the world, forcing every person, leaders, soldiers, and civilians alike, to confront a simple truth. True strength was not in domination or fear, but in courage, understanding, and moral choice. Dr. Lila Sanders observed the changes unfolding across Earth with cautious hope. Communities were rebuilding trust, schools taught lessons of empathy and cooperation, and scientists worked side by side with Varelians on technologies that could heal the planet. Even military leaders began to question the wisdom of aggression. Orders that once emphasized attack and control were replaced, slowly, with initiatives to collaborate, learn, and observe. Yet not all humans had embraced this shift. In secret, a rogue faction of Earth's military continued to plot, convinced that the aliens' patience was temporary and that dominance was the only way to ensure survival. They gathered ships and weapons, preparing for a final assault that would defy the growing consensus for peace. Their movements were hidden from the public, known only to a few high-ranking officers who refused to listen to reason. The Varelians, ever aware of human activity, remained calm. Kalen had watched humanity with patience, understanding that fear could take many forms. They did not act preemptively. Instead, they continued their work, sharing knowledge, teaching young humans, and demonstrating that restraint and cooperation were the true paths to strength. The aliens' presence became a constant lesson for humanity. The universe was vast, opportunities were endless, but trust and courage would determine who would thrive. It was during this tense period that the rogue faction attempted to launch their final assault. A fleet of warships rose from hidden bases, aiming directly for the Varelian embassy. The skies filled with the glint of metal and the hum of engines. Soldiers in the fleet were conflicted. Some had witnessed the Varelians' restraint and were unwilling to strike, while others felt compelled to follow orders. Dr. Sanders, informed by civilians and dissenting soldiers, immediately requested a meeting with the leaders of this rogue faction. She pleaded with them, showing evidence of the aliens' peaceful actions. "They could destroy us in a moment," she said firmly. "Yet they choose not to. Violence will not protect us. Cooperation will. Look at what humanity can become if we rise to this challenge." Her words, broadcast secretly to all soldiers in the fleet, began to have an effect. Some pilots hesitated mid-flight. Others radioed back their refusal to participate. A small mutiny began to spread quietly, leaving the fleet fragmented and confused. For the first time, fear and aggression were met with moral courage from within humanity itself. Meanwhile, the Varelians did not intervene aggressively. Instead, Kalen extended an olive branch through energy projections that communicated a simple truth. Strength is shown by restraint, not attack. Humanity can rise to its potential if it chooses wisely. The message was received not as a command, but as a mirror for humans to reflect upon their choices. At the embassy, Dr. Sanders worked tirelessly to coordinate communication. Using both human and Varelian technology, she arranged live dialogue between rogue fleet commanders, civilians, and Varelian mediators. Soldiers listened as Kalen spoke directly to them, explaining how patience, wisdom, and cooperation had transformed Varelia and could transform Earth. "You are capable of greatness," Kalen said softly, eyes glowing. "Fear is natural, but courage is choosing understanding over aggression. Humanity has the power to decide its future." The effect was profound. More pilots and soldiers refused orders, turning away from aggression and joining initiatives to collaborate with civilians. Within hours, the rogue faction's plan collapsed. Ships returned to base, weapons powered down, and commanders reluctantly acknowledged that confrontation was no longer feasible. Humanity had chosen restraint, not because it was forced to, but because courage and wisdom had triumphed over fear. In the cities below, people celebrated quietly. Civilians who had worked tirelessly to build communication networks, peace campaigns, and collaborative projects with the Varelians saw their efforts come to fruition. Artists painted murals of humans and Varelians standing together in harmony. Students composed music inspired by the courage and moral awakening of their species. Humanity's greatest victory had not been in combat, but in choosing the path of moral courage. The Varelians, recognizing humanity's choice, expanded their collaborations. They shared advanced technologies for energy, medicine, and environmental restoration, teaching humans to use them responsibly. Together, human and alien engineers built floating research stations, renewable energy plants, and laboratories to study both Earth and the cosmos. The Varelians encouraged exploration, creativity, and learning, but always reminded humans that responsibility and ethical choice were the true measure of strength. Political leaders, witnessing the public's and military's embrace of cooperation, formally opened diplomatic channels with the Varelians. Treaties were signed, not of dominance or fear, but of mutual respect, understanding, and shared goals. Earth was no longer a planet living in fear of the unknown. It had become a participant in a broader galactic community. Soldiers who had once prepared for war now trained in collaboration, learning to use alien technologies for healing, building, and exploration rather than destruction. Civilians, inspired by these changes, contributed in every way they could, developing tools, teaching future generations, and spreading knowledge of the choices that had led humanity to this point. Dr. Sanders reflected on the journey with a quiet sense of fulfillment. Humanity had been tested, and in many ways it had failed initially, striking first out of fear. Yet it had also risen above its worst instincts, learning from the Varelians' example and discovering the power of moral courage. The lesson was clear. True strength was not in weapons or dominance, but in empathy, understanding, and the ability to make the right choice even when it was difficult. Kalen, speaking during the final public gathering, praised humanity's growth. "Your species has faced fear, aggression, and doubt. You have also shown courage, restraint, and wisdom. The future is yours to shape. Choose knowledge over destruction, empathy over fear, and understanding over hatred. Your path among the stars is only beginning." The Varelians then invited humans to join them in exploration beyond the solar system. Together they planned missions to distant planets, shared research on alien ecosystems, and studied the mysteries of the galaxy. Humanity's curiosity, Resilience and moral courage were now guiding it toward an extraordinary future, one in which mistakes were lessons and growth was celebrated. In quiet moments across the planet, ordinary humans looked up at the sky. They remembered the shimmer of the first Virilian ships, the restraint displayed during the attempted attack, and the choice their species had made. Children asked their parents about the aliens, about courage, and about the possibility of exploring the stars. Farmers, engineers, and teachers discussed the new technologies and ideas that were reshaping their lives. The story of fear overcome by moral choice became part of Earth's collective memory. Even in the remnants of military factions that had resisted cooperation, reflection continued. Many realized that their previous fears had blinded them to opportunity. Others quietly joined civilian and scientific initiatives, contributing to exploration, education, and environmental restoration. Humanity was learning that leadership, responsibility, and moral courage were as vital as any weapon or fleet. Dr. Sanders stood on a hill overlooking the ocean one evening, watching the Virelian embassy glow softly above the horizon. She thought about the weeks of tension, fear, and reflection. Humanity had faced its own darkness, and for the first time, it had chosen to rise above it. The path ahead would not be easy. There would always be fear, doubt, and the temptation of aggression, but humanity had proven that it could learn, grow, and act with wisdom. The Virelian's light reflected on the water, shimmering like a promise. "We have waited for this moment," Kaelin said quietly, standing beside her. "Your species has begun to see itself clearly. You have learned that true power is measured not in weapons, but in courage, empathy, and moral choice." Dr. Sanders nodded, feeling the weight and wonder of the moment. Humanity had stumbled, but it had also risen. It had betrayed trust, yet it had rebuilt it. It had faced fear, yet it had chosen courage. The story of the first contact was not a tale of war. It was a story of growth, of moral awakening, and of the extraordinary potential that lay within the human spirit. As night fell, the stars above shone brighter than ever. The Virelians and humans prepared for the future together, exploring new frontiers, discovering new knowledge, and building a society guided by courage and understanding. The galaxy, vast and full of mystery, awaited the next steps of humanity, a species that had chosen to rise above fear and embrace its potential for greatness. Earth had sent its soldiers once, but in the end, humanity's greatest triumph came not from weapons, but from the choice to act with wisdom, restraint, and hope. The lesson of that first encounter would live on for generations, a reminder that even in the face of fear, humans could rise to their highest ideals.